So the women had their fun with their Valentine's Day event, but now it's time for the boys to get their time in the spotlight with the one-day event and the headlining servant being Takasugi. And man, do I have some things to say about this servant because I really like his design. He's not even that bad from a gameplay perspective either. It's just, man, is he in a really poor position, especially with the Lilim Harlot, you know, the FGO Arcade collaboration event, little known event, maybe you've heard about it, being bumped up a little bit. You know, it's not by a whole lot, but the fact that either the pre-release campaign or the event is properly going to be dropping at the very end of March does put this guy in kind of a poor position. But hopefully after watching this video, you will be well informed as to whether or not you should summon for this character, which I'm going to go ahead and just say at the very beginning, unless you absolutely love this character's design, or are for whatever reason just super determined to do, you know, quick AoE looping with an archer for some reason, I would not advise summoning for this character. Maybe you're just a huge collector and you're like, I gotta get every single servant in the game. You know, maybe that's just your prerogative, but unless you fall into any of those weird niche categories, I don't recommend going for Takasugi over here because he's not really doing anything super unique. But again, we're gonna break it down in today's video. As per usual, if you find the video to be informative or maybe even entertaining, a like on the video and a subscribe to the channel would mean a lot, as it's absolutely free and helps me out more than you know. And I do be putting these FGO videos out every single day. But with all that being said, let's stop the yapping and let's start getting into Takaguni's kit, starting off with his hits. Takaflubi over here is rocking some pretty nice ones because the current quick meta is in the position where you want to be using a character that has 2 Buster and 2 quick cards. Because of how Ruler Scotty's first skill works, it would essentially give you the ability to have 200% crit damage on your Buster cards and 100% crit damage on your quick cards. So 4 of your 5 cards are guaranteed to have at least 100% crit damage, and he is, to his credit, a crit servant, so he's going to pair very nicely. If you just love running up the large crit numbers, he will do very good numbers on that. And his NP gain, I think, is a little deceiving for how well this guy is able to refund because his hits are so high. At 0.57% NP gain, you would assume that he doesn't loop very well, but his NP is rocking 8 hits, so even against Berserker enemies, as you'll see at some point for the background gameplay for this video, with only 1 Ruler Scotty, 1 Caster Scotty, and having to substitute in an Asclepius because I don't have my own Takasugi, so kind of had to improvise a quick setup, he's still able to get through it very comfortably. I believe the friend had like a 50% starting charge CE, so no K-scope needed, nothing like that. So you could still do really good work with him because his hits are so high. And because they are so high, he is going to be getting some pretty decent NP refund on his crits. And like I mentioned before, that is the main thing that he's going to be doing. To highlight his passive skills, Takamudi over here is rocking one that's kind of unique in Hero of the Reformation, Eccentric, and this guy is definitely a little bit of an eccentric guy, because it's giving him an additional arts buff of 6% on his passive. So even though you're predominantly going to be buffing this guy's quick cards and kind of his Buster cards with Ruler Scotty, he still has a way to ensure that those arts cards are also getting a decent buff, not only from the passive skill over here, but from his own NP as well, which we'll cover in a second. But it does lead to him, and this kind of shows off that he is a very balanced servant. You know, Takasugi is not doing anything better than any other servant, but he is also doing everything rather well. As we get into this, you'll see that he does a pretty decent job at buffing the party, keeping himself safe, giving himself the buffs he needs, kind of has a little bit of a flex spot as a utility character, and can also do some really good damage. Not the best damage, but also not the worst damage. So with that being said, let's start moving into Takabudi's actual skills, starting off with skill 1, Unconventional Child Prodigy, which is definitely a mouthful. This skill is going to be giving the entire party 20% quick, 20% buster, and 1 stage of overcharge that all last for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. Now, one thing to keep note is that his cooldowns can be viewed as 1 lower because of his second skill. Again, we'll get to that later, but on face value, this is not a bad skill. The values are a little bit low, but he himself will be taking care of his own quick and buster performance, again, on his NP, so realistically, that shouldn't be that much of a concern if you're worried about his own performance. And then the overcharge is actually rather nice. We know that from characters like, say, Lady Avalon or like Morgan that are able to give these other characters the overcharge on their NP, that it can be very broken. It can be stupid, dummy, insane. I mean, I have a recent appreciation for Koyan Dark because she synergizes so well with Morgan 3, you know, Ace the Savior.
specifically because her second skill gives 2 stages of overcharge, so you can almost immediately get that bonker's third skill up right away. Kind of depends if you're using like other overcharge guys or you're just relying on Palladium Guard, but still really good. So
for Takalusi over here, you would expect this to be really bonkers. The unfortunate thing is that the quick supports we have right now are really just Scotty and Ruler Scotty. So if you're going to use them with conventional supports, the overcharge doesn't really do a whole lot for them. I mean, it's nice, but it's not as outwardly broken as, say, someone like Tamamo's overcharge giving you a bunch of NP back and it synergizes really well with the team, or getting solemn defense on Castoria. I suppose the overcharges could be worse on, say, both of the Scotty's NPs, but the other outlying issue is that you're really never going to get their NPs if you're doing a traditional quick setup. The reason those arts NPs are so broken is that you're always doing arch chain, so even if you're not going for Castoria, Tamamo, Lady Avalon's, arts cards, you're still going to get their NPs eventually because everybody has party-wide battery skills, and the arch chain gives everyone involved in said arch chain 20% NP, so you're just passively racking up NP without having to really do anything. You don't really do that with quick. So maybe in Anniversary 10, you do a quick chain, you get like 10-20% NP as well, or they shadow drop some really insane new quick support, which I'd be a little bit sad about because Ruler Scotty is hot, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We'll do a different video another day talking about Mommy Scotty over in there and just how she's the absolute GOAT. But let's move over into Takabusi's second skill over here. Innovate Armaments Reformation, which okay, whatever that's supposed to mean. This is a very simple skill as it's going to increase one ally's critical damage by 50% for 3 turns and then reduce their skill cooldown by 1, and this in and of itself is on a 6-turn cooldown. This is why I said the first skill could be viewed as 1 lower, because if you give this to himself, it'll lower said cooldown by 1, and being able to target and give somebody 50% crit damage, that's not bad. I mean, most players have used Waver, and this is effectively the same skill, but instead of giving NP, it has a little bit more technical use in that you can use it to get some skill cooldowns back a little bit faster. I see what they were going for this because Quick's main issue is that, say you're going into a boss fight or something, is that you need to take the boss out in 3 turns, because once you lose all of your buffs that are usually going to last for 3 turns, they don't really do anything. In an art setup, if you burn through all 3 turns of your buffs, at least people like Proto Merlin or Tamamo or Castoria can keep you alive until you get your skills back, and Buster has a little bit of leeway because either A, you have Merlin, who is also doing kind of the same thing that Arts is doing, just kind of keeping you alive until you can get your skills back and all that good stuff, or Koyanskaya is giving you a bonus 3 turns because she gives you your skills back. She might not be able to give more skills because she's still going to be on cooldown, but at least your main DPS will then still be able to get their survivabilities, batteries, big buffs back, and so they'll still be able to put pressure on the boss, whereas Quick doesn't really have that. So I like the idea for this, it just doesn't synergize very well with the current playstyle of Quick, but at the very least, Skill 1 and Skill 2 have these additional neat effects with NP overcharge, reducing skill cooldown, but he still has really good base effects. So these are things that might age better as time goes on, depending on what other Quick supports we get. They're not bad effects to have, it's just Quick isn't in a position to really utilize them as well as, say, Arts and Buster are. And then Takahashi's third skill over here is Retaining the Spirit of Japanese, which is going to give him a Guts that is going to give him a 3k heal that lasts for 3 turns. It gives him a 30% battery and increases his own attack by 30% for 3 turns on a 7-turn cooldown. And again, this is what I mean by he kind of just gives himself everything he would want. He has survivability, which is really good in the current Quick builds because the Scotties really aren't doing the most to keep you around. I mean, sure, Ruler Scotty can reduce the enemy's cooldown by 1, or their NP gauge by 1 rather. And then the OG Scotty can give you 1 hit of dodge, which is super great, right? I'm memeing, but it can at least let you dodge an NP if you ever get Scotty's own NP, and she gives you a little bit of damage cut, and a little bit of damage cut, mind you. I mean, almost as memeable as Jean's NP 1 5% defense, but like I said earlier, you're never really going to get those NPs because of how you play in a Quick team unless you're specifically going for either of the Scotty's NP. So the fact that he has a way to keep himself alive is really good right now, and even if we do get some mega quick version of Castoria, having your own survivability is just always good in case one of your supports gets taken out, or the skill's not up, or their NP's not up. It's just good to have. The 30% battery is good enough for him to be able to do farming, does synergize rather well if you also want to go for his append skill, so he can start off with a 20% battery, then with his 30%, any 50% starting charge CE means that he can just immediately fire his NP. Wish it was a 50 because 50 is kind of the gold standard right now for the more bonker servant, but do not get it twisted or anything. It's still good enough for him to be able to do farming. He's going to be fine. And then the attack buff is what allows him to do some pretty decent damage. But let's go ahead and close out with the NP. And I'm a little mixed on this one because the NP has no like normal effect, right? It just deals damage to enemies, but the overcharge is where all the power is at, which again does synergize with his first skill, right? So at least, even though none of the other quick supports are really going to take advantage of this right now, he can still use this for his own means, and it's going to give him a 20% quick, arts, and buster buff for 1 turn, and then a 30% critical damage buff for 3 turns that are all technically upgraded because of his own first skill to 25% Omni card buffs and a 35% crit damage buff. So just off his own merits, he's going to be rocking a baseline of 45% quick and buster damage and 85% crit damage that does stack. Now, unfortunately, and this is the one thing that I think if they wanted to make him just a little bit better, and I have this conspiracy that sometimes they drop servants in these weird ways so they open themselves up to buff them in the future. It's like Draco's NP doesn't really have a whole lot on it, where her skills are chock full of effects, so if they ever wanted to buff Draco, they could just buff the NP. Takasugi, I think, is very similar, that if they wanted to help this guy out and go back and buff him to make him a bit better, they would also let him stack the card performance buffs, because his base damage is not bad. Whether you're comparing him with just all of like the quick loopers in the game, he's kind of like middle of the pack for free with no power mods, which on the one hand is like, oh, he has like no ramping damage, but on the other hand, he's always going to be consistent with the damage he's doing. Or if you're just comparing him to other archers, he's always just going to be looking pretty decent. He's not going to hit the highs of somebody like, say, Gilgamesh, but he's always going to be relatively consistent. You're always going to get the same numbers. But if he had the ability to buff those cards, not only would it mean that his already pretty decent looping would be even better, because very similar to, say, somebody like Jason, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago, every single time he'd fire his NP, he would not only be doing more damage, but he would also be looping easier and easier because he's getting that quick buff that's not only buffing quick damage, but quick NP refund, and he's already got really good hits on his NP, so it's just a little disappointing to see from Takaflossi over here, because I wish they did give him this. It feels like they purposefully held back just a little bit, because this really could have made him just one of the best generalists in the game. I think he's still really solid as a generalist servant, you know, someone you could always rely on to do good crits, someone that can always refund relatively well, can take care of themselves, and if you want to build for it and you want to kind of do a build around this guy, you can build around, say, the skill cooldown and stuff like the overcharge especially. But it does feel like they held back just a little bit, which was why when we got him announced on White Day 2 years ago, I was a little disappointed. Everybody else wanted comment saws. I was actually specifically hoping for Takaflossi over here, and then we did get him, saw his skills and effects, and I was like, where is the power mod? If you're not going to let him build up, then you gotta give him some type of power mod. That's just generally how the meta is going to work. But it does seem like they were content to drop him as a crit build-up type of guy, which in that sense, he is, again, still pretty good at being able to do some big crits, but again, just feels like they held back just a little bit at the very end for Papalugi over here. I do want to also go ahead and highlight his Bond CE, because now that we know the JP side of things is getting the whole Grand Servant, you know, special marathon or whatever you want to call it over there, that upgrade is going to allow every servant that you decide to take to the Grand Servant level, you know, grail them to level 100, make sure their skills are done. Bond 10, I think, is the minimum requirement for Bond levels. You can use both their Bond CE and you can use a normal CE with each other. So even though I think Takasugi here doesn't have the craziest Bond CE, it is still nice. You know, 8% party buster quick and 10% crit damage while he's there. That's not bad. It's a little bit of extra damage. His crits are going to be critting a little bit harder, and if you're going to be putting him in a multi-core setup, everybody will just be doing that much more damage. So again, like I said at the very beginning of this video, is this guy worth rolling for? I think he's not a bad servant, but what I say rolling for in the context for what we have coming out after, definitely not. I mean, while I think this is a very like neat servant that they decided to put out there, you know, a consistent guy that has technically some ramp up for the crit damage, but not anything else, and then some decent utility and can kind of, you know, take care of himself, that's not a bad servant to put out there. But in the context that we have Tiamat and Draco coming out in just, what, maybe 4 weeks tops, And then after that, we have the Ordeal Call servants with Bhima and Durga, who I'm just going to let you know for free are better than this character. And then on top of that, the Tower event is going to be bringing Saber Medusa, who, at least at this point when she drops on NA, I think is in contention for best single target quick servant in the game. And God forbid you start thinking about Anniversary and the Summer event that are just bringing some absolute humdingers at the very end of the year. Or middle of the year, because end of the year is going to be Yusuke Pinchin. Let's not talk about her. I don't want to think about her until we get to the end of the year, because oh boy, that unit is something else. They are a demon. They made a monster with that one. So main takeaway is that I would not advise that you summon for this character, but if you really like his design, maybe you read White Day and you're like, nah, I really like this guy, I want to check a couple of multis at him, that's fine. I just wouldn't advise it. You know, he is a servant that will serve you well. He's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not worth rolling for considering what the other characters we are going to be getting around them. And again, he's in a bit more of an unfortunate position as opposed to, say, someone like Pope Joanna, who just left the NA side of things, because Pope Joanna, you might at least be able to flex as a little bit of a support type servant, something along those lines. Takaflubi over here is going to be competing with the other quick AoE servants, and people like Dante's are already pretty good, and people like Voyager are going to get even better once they get their buff, so not exactly going to be in the best position as like quick AoE guys are concerned. But that's basically all that I have for you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know if you're going to be rolling for this guy down there as well. If this video serves as a summoning catalyst for you, let me know if you were able to get him. You went against all the good advice and you're like, you know what? I'm going to chuck a multi. I got him. And then you're just going to rub it in everybody's face.
Let's go gambling! I can't stop winning!
Just go ahead and do that in the comment section down below. You might be the luckiest person on the planet. As per usual, like on the video, subscribe for more FGO content every single day, as it's absolutely free and helps me out more than you know. But if you want to take that extra step, the Patreon is linked down in the description down below, as well as our Discord. Discord is absolutely free to join, but if you want to get access to a super saucy secret channel, becoming a Patreon member will give you access to that. There's also some, and I say some, patron exclusive content over there. Where like occasionally I'll drop a video whenever I'm like, you know, I don't think I would actually just upload this as a daily video, but this would be really interesting to just kind of talk about in general. Things like going over FGO story or going over costumes and stuff that I would like to see in the game are things that I've put over on the Patreon. And again, if you do become a patron member, you go into that exclusive channel. You can also yell at me to actually like make more of those. So that's another positive thing over there as well. But not necessary, you know, watching the video, liking, subscribing, and maybe coming out to the live streams is all the support I need. If you want to go that extra mile, it's there for you, but don't feel pressured to do so. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace, late guys.